presentation from Community Transit. You guys can, Emmett, feel free to come on up. And I think yeah.
Need a double click there?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I'm sure you can, but need more room.
Oh, that's great.
Okay. I can put a little button. There we go.
Thank you. Perfect. Well, first of all, thank you all very much for giving us a few minutes to come down and talk to you about what Community Transit is doing with Mukilteo, what we're doing in Snohomish County. I have about 10 minutes of prepared comments, but before I begin those, I want to start by acknowledging a long-standing relationship between the City of Mukilteo and Community Transit. Recently, Mayor Gregerson has been a strong voice for transportation. In particular, we feel like she's been a strong voice in support of Community Transit. And I also want to acknowledge Mark Elias in his role as state senator. The senator, of course, worked tirelessly to help achieve a long-term or a transportation package for the state, and that transportation package includes a section authorizing a local option ballot measure for community transit. And we're very, very thankful to Senator Elias for his work in the legislature on our behalf. So I have two key messages that I want to share with you tonight. Those are that investments in transit help our economy grow, and they also help protect our quality of life. At Community Transit, our whole purpose is to serve the needs of the people of Snohomish County. And every year that mission expands as more people come to the community. We've seen almost unprecedented growth, excuse me, and you all have seen that in the physical landscape. It's witnessed by all the cranes, cement trucks, construction sites, and new retail development throughout the county and in your city as well. The Puget Sound Regional Council forecasts that by 2040, Snohomish County's population will grow by 240,000 people, about 10,000 people a year. And jobs will grow by about 130,000, And in each of the last 2 years, Community Transit, Snohomish County has added about 3,500 new housing units. But in 2016, there are already 3,600 issues on tap. And in 2017, another 4,000. We've been getting smarter about the county's growth. And in the last 3 years, more than 1,600 residential units have been constructed or permitted near major transit facilities and along transit corridors. The slide that's on display is a transit-oriented development project located adjacent to our Ashway Park and Ride lot just north of Linwood. This type of development helps reduce cars on the road, it helps reduce vehicle miles traveled, and it protects our quality of life. And still, the county continues to grow and attract new residents. We remain a strong manufacturing economy, with Boeing continuing to be a big driver of local jobs, but we're also adding jobs in other areas such as high-tech, healthcare, business services, and tourism. We know that Mukilteo is committed to retaining its character and high quality of life, and we also understand that Mukilteo, just like the rest of the county, is continuing to grow. Your current population is about 20,000. And your forecast is for nearly 22,000 by 2035. Your comprehensive plan estimates that you'll have 570 additional housing units in those 20 years. And our aim is to try to keep pace with your growth. On a busy day, about 40,000 people ride community transit buses, vehicles, vans, and DART paratransit vehicles. That's equivalent to about twice the entire population of Mukilteo every day on a regular basis. A lot of people take a lot of pride in our local transit service, and we take a lot of pride in being able to provide that public transit service to Mukilteo and to Snohomish County. On the next slide, we try to make it easy for everyone to use public transportation. In our service district, about 47% of the population lives within an easy walk of a bus stop, and about 75% of the jobs in Snohomish County are within an easy walk of one of our bus routes. In your city, almost 500 people board our buses at 63 bus stops, every day. About 56% of your residents live within walking distance of a bus stop, and then on the map that's displayed, the green area is representing the 56% of your population that has just an easy walk to the nearest bus. Transit's already a key part of your city's transportation infrastructure, and we know that enhancing transit service is a very important part of the long-range planning that you all are doing for Mukilteo. I have just a short story I'd like to tell you about the recent restoration of our Sunday service. In June, we brought Sunday service back after a 5-year hiatus. On that very first Sunday, 5,000 people showed up to ride our service. Our scheduling supervisor wanted to witness the first rider on that Sunday, so he went out at 6:04 in the morning to the Aurora Village Transit Center to witness the first person getting on the first trip that day. The first person on that first Sunday was wearing an Arby's uniform, and they were on their way to work. We've talked about that story internally, and we take a lot of pride in the fact that we were able to help that person get to work early on a Sunday morning. We also discuss amongst ourselves, we don't know how she got to work the Sunday before that, but we take a lot of pride knowing that now, early in the morning on a Sunday, we can help that person get to their job. The other day, we were in Marysville talking with their city council, giving a similar presentation. We were talking about how many people ride their most popular route pair, the 201, 202, up and down State Avenue. After the presentation was done, one of their council members commented that his business was located on State Avenue, and he expressed how much he appreciated that his employees and his customers were able to rely on public transit to have frequent and reliable transit service to get to their job and to get to his place of business. The point is, whether you ride one of our buses or not, it's in all of our best interest that people are able to get to their jobs quickly and efficiently and using public transportation. And I think it's no exaggeration to say that having fast, frequent, available public transportation keeps our local economy running. So, what's the biggest challenge we face at community transit? Well, it's demand. It's population growth and employment growth and a healthy economy are driving more and more people to want to use public transportation. Every bus that we own, every coach operator that we employ is presently in service, filling the demand for our public transit service. Last year, our ridership increase was 8%. This year, it's on a trend to increase even more. On our commuter service to Seattle, buses fill at the very first stop. Even on our double-tall buses that hold 110 passengers when they're full of seated passengers and standees, people can be standing in the aisle for an entire commute. And increasingly, that commute is 80 minutes or more from Everett to downtown Seattle. And every morning, more and more people are showing up to try to get onto those, especially to try to get onto those commuter routes. On the screen is a snapshot from an onboard camera on one of our double-tall buses. This is a Route 412 out of the McCollum Park and Ride to Seattle. The first couple trips in the morning were always full. People fill up the seats, they stand in the aisles. There's 110 people on that bus, and we were leaving people standing on the platform wanting to get on, but not having any room. In that case, we were able to move some resources around and add an additional trip. This is last fall. We had a few other circumstances in our system where we were able to move resources, buses and operators around to fill that excess demand. And last fall, we were able to do that. But overall, at this point, we are stretched beyond our limits to serve the demand that we have for our services, to serve the demand that our customers want and that our customers expect. Thankfully, we have an opportunity to make investments to improve and grow our transit service. The governor, as I mentioned, recently signed into law a new state transportation funding package. That package included authority for community transit to seek new funding. The very next day, our board of directors took action to place a measure on the November ballot to ask the voters if they want to increase public transit service. If approved, Proposition 1 which is what the ballot measure is now called, would enable us to add additional buses to downtown Seattle and to the University District to help alleviate that crowding on those popular commuter routes. It's like I might have a commuter on the council. We would also be able to add buses and van pools across our entire service area, including, importantly, better connections and more service providing east-west connections in the southern and especially southwest part of the county. If the ballot measure succeeds, we would increase the number of trips on existing routes. That would mean more trips on routes such as the 113, that is local service for you in Mukilteo, especially increasing that frequency on weekdays, increasing the frequency on weekends, and expanding the span of operation from earlier in the morning to later at night. Also, potentially more trips on the Route 417 and 880 to downtown Seattle and to the University of Washington. We'd also pursue new routes throughout our entire service area. We know that there's interest in having a connection from our soon-to-be-built Seaway Transit Center to the west side of Painfield and to the Mukilteo Speedway, and that's the type of new connection that we're hopeful we'll be able to add if our proposition is successful. On the screen is just a conceptual map of one of those new routes. This happens to be Marysville to McCollum Park in South Everett, which would travel through Lake Stevens and Snohomish, back across 132nd to 128th to the McCollum Park and Ride. We've been wanting to provide this kind of new connection for years, but haven't been able to afford to establish new routes such as this. So new routes and new connections are a very important part of how we plan to expand new service. And I would have to interject here that in recent conversations between the mayor, myself, and a mutual constituent, an example of new service to your area might be serving the Future of Flight Foundation with hopefully what could be a new extension from our Seaway Transit Center by the Future of Flight Foundation and into your neighborhood in Mukilteo. Also, with additional funding, we could add another swift bus rapid transit line between Painfield and Canyon Park. Our second swift line would connect about 65,000 manufacturing jobs in the Boeing Painfield Manufacturing Center with about 25,000 high-tech jobs in the Canyon Park area. And also, that route would serve very high-density residential and commercial activity between Painfield and Canyon Park. A second line of SWIFT also establishes a bus rapid transit or BRT network in our county. So people along the SWIFT line could transfer at Highway 99 and Airport Road to quickly perhaps get to Mill Creek, get to their town center, or maybe get to Boeing. Also, with a transfer at Airport Road, people have a very convenient high-capacity transit or BRT connection north to the Everett Station, south to the Aurora Village Transit Center, and from those multimodal transit centers, all points throughout the region. In fact, if we're successful with Proposition 1, gaining new funding, we would start planning for a third SWIFT line, which could be up and running by the time light rail is scheduled to reach Linwood in 2023. An important part of the improvements is that we can deliver these improvements right away. If our proposition is approved in November, the very first improvements to our service would be seen in March of 2016. Then, allowing time for public comment and to order new buses, more service would be added over the next 2 years. The second SWIFT line would be up and running by 2018, and we're hopeful that a third line of SWIFT, again, could be up and running before light rail reaches the Linwood Transit Center in 2023. The important thing there is we're talking about delivering these improvements in a time frame that's a few months to a few years. It's not measured in decades. So, main message today, that these are the kind of transit investments that, as they say, help grow the economy, they help protect our quality of life. And I have just a couple of statistics that I'd like to share with you on that point. In our morning peak time, about 80% of all of our riders are on their way to work. They're heading to their jobs, they're earning a paycheck, they're paying taxes, they're helping the economy grow. That's an example of how our service helps the economy grow. And that in the afternoon, the 80% who are on their way to work are on their way home. Perhaps meeting friends, maybe on their way to a Little League game, maybe just sitting on the porch with loved ones. But the point is, we took them to work and we brought them home. And for us, that's an example of how we help protect the quality of life. We have the opportunity to ensure that our future here in Snohomish County is just as amazing as the community that we know today. We know what we have to do. We know how to do it. We know the investments that we need to make. And we know that the citizens of Snohomish County appreciate having a vital and locally based transit system. I'm out in the community a lot, and I hear it all the time. People see our blue and white bus brand, and they will comment that that's my bus. And you can hear that they take pride in ownership, and we certainly take pride, as I say, in being able to provide them with that vital, locally based transit service. And for those reasons, and with your help, we're confident we can continue to help the economy grow and protect the quality of life for residents here in Mukilteo and across Snohomish County. So I came out this evening with a colleague of mine, Todd Morrow. He
moved to the front row.
And Todd and I are available to answer any questions you might have or seek clarification on anything that we've discussed up to this point. I want to thank you again for giving us time to share these thoughts with your council.
Thank you, Emmett. We have a couple questions, and I'd just like to share that as CT moves forward and looks at expanding options for service, that better connections to the east side from Mukilteo, Bellevue and Redmond job centers, and kind of the ends of the service schedule are important. I had a note to mention that kind of access over to Seaway and around Paynefield, but you covered that. So, Councilmember Schmaltz.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it, and thanks for expanding your service and making that a goal. I think it's important. We just had Sound Transit here last meeting explaining, the importance of public transportation and the problem with the commutes and people in cover. Quick question: when you did make the cuts due to the recession, the cuts in service, the Sunday service, and some of the direct lines, I think, down into Seattle or close to it. We had some feedback from some of our residents that were concerned about how long it took them to get to work. So, are you going to be putting the routes that you eliminated back into service, or are you going to more direct than having to catch, a bus and then catch another bus and then walk a few, quarter mile to work? So some of those, I just wanted to get some clarification on that.
A couple of things. First, you mentioned the length of the commute. My benchmark was when speed limits were 70, you could go 80, and it was a 16-minute trip from Everett to Seattle. Right. That's now, if you want a 90% chance of getting to Seattle on time, you need to give yourself 80 minutes, and 90, 100, 110, 120 minutes is not out of the question on that commute. So that's what folks are facing. Secondly, when we cut service in 2012, at the same time we cut service, we completely reconfigured our network. Right. That resulted in a much more efficient service. So even though we cut 37% of our service hours, we maintained 96% of our average weekday ridership. Okay. So while we cut a lot of service, okay, what we put back was much more efficient. If we're successful with a proposition in November, we wouldn't necessarily put back something that was cut. We would hope to put back something that was more efficient and that was contemporary in terms of what your citizens want now. What we put back will be the result of about a year-and-a-half public outreach effort to find out what people want, where they want it, okay, so that we're very judicious about putting back the hours that we are able to afford.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. The second question I had, this is the second topic. Now, are you do you know about the park and ride at all? Do you know? Okay. So I just wanted to get a quick update on that and see how that was progressing.
Again,
at
thanks.
Bernie Weber.
Right. Mukilteo Park and
Right,
Ride, Bernie
yeah.
Weber Drive. Again, thanks to great work in the state legislature.
Mm-hmm.
That Park and Ride is funded by a Washington State Regional Mobility Grant at $3.6 million.
Mm-hmm.
The status right now, the next important step is finalizing a lease arrangement with the airport for long-term use of that space. We also need to finalize arrangements for contributions from the partners to that project to the local match for that grant, that state grant.
Right.
Once we have the local match and the lease agreement finalized, we'll be full speed ahead finalizing the planning. We would hope ideally to do the planning in 2016 and open that park and ride in 2017.
Okay. Okay, great. And I'm going to lobby you right now. Okay? For if you could have the bus go into the park and ride and pick up the passengers instead of having to have them walk and cross the street at the Speedway. We've talked about it a little bit. It's a dangerous intersection, so if there's anything that, when that gets up and running, that we could have that would be very helpful. So
that has been a topic of conversation between Mukilteo staff and our staff, and I am just so tempted to launch into that discussion, but
okay. But I'm gonna.
We're very much engaged with folks who have an interest in buses entering the park and ride. It's an ongoing conversation.
Right.
At this point, our position is to remain on the Speedway in order to maintain the speed of that service, but it's still an ongoing conversation.
Okay, great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilmember Grafer.
Yeah, in your handout, it's talking about the bond issue you want to pass, and it says community transit's current sales tax rate is 0.9% in all jurisdictions within its service area, which is most of Snohomish County, excluding Everett. Could you clarify what that means?
Yes. When community transit was formed, it included several cities in Snohomish County, but the city of Everett itself was not included in the service area that was established for us. Subsequently, most of the small, medium, and large cities across the whole county have opted into our service area. But Everett Transit has always had its own city transit service, and they have opted to maintain that city-controlled transit service, which now serves as sort of an island within the greater public transit benefit area that we serve. So they are an island within our service area. We work very closely with Everett. I would like to think that the service they offer and the service that we offer provides seamless transportation to citizens. The best example of that is our Swift route on Highway 99, which is a partnership with the city of Everett.
But they don't contribute any financial
Generally
help.
speaking, they do not contribute to our operation. In the case of the Swift line that I mentioned, they do make a regular annual financial contribution to the cost of operating that line.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Wheeler.
That was a very good presentation,
Thank
by
you.
the way. Thank you very much. And I have just a couple little questions. First, I have to agree with Steve that running across, you'll eventually go in there as soon as somebody gets hit. So we know that'll happen if you don't go in there originally. But just a trivial question. How many double-decker buses do you have? I noticed on your photo here it shows that you have 9 of them. Is that just a small fleet that you have, or is that?
Well, we have 22 more. We have 23. We have 22 more on order. We're in the process of taking delivery of those, so 45. We've also ordered on our contract an additional 5 buses for use by Sound Transit on their routes that we operate for them.
Great. So you're definitely expecting expansion.
They're far and away the most popular bus we have. Customers love them. We're going from 22 to 45.
Perfect.
And if we could afford more, we'd buy more. Maybe in March of 2016.
Let's hope so. I only had one more question, is that whoever presented this program for your presentation, They did a very, very good job, but I'm not going to send it to my relatives because I continue to tell my relatives we don't have pretty weather up here. It's raining all the time. And every one of your photos is a gorgeous photo of Seattle area. And I mean, somebody's doing a good job on the marketing, and you guys have done, I want to thank you guys very much for that.
Very kind, thank you.
Yeah, I got a chance to ride one of the double talls on my way home from a meeting what was the day that was horrifically rainy? I think that was Friday.
Friday.
Yeah. But then I had to sit at Ashway for an hour to wait for the 113. So that was not as much fun. Actually not the 113, the 880 is the one I ended up. Because every single bus out of downtown Seattle at 3:15 was full for a really long time. And so I finally just got on the next bus going north, which is what everyone around me did. It took a long time to get home. Any other questions from council? All right. Well, thank you, Emmett and Todd, for coming out and for your partnership, providing great service to our community. We really appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you all very much.
Thanks.